What's happening, Hardscapers? This is episode 354 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And with spring on our mind, I am taking a couple of back-to-back interviews we did with Marty Grunder years and years ago when we first started this podcast, back to our first year. And Marty talked about qualifying clients and the first consultation, since this is something that we're going to be dealing with coming into the 2026 season. Hopefully you can bring something from this into your business as you start taking care of those leads coming in. And I hope everybody's getting some leads trickling in to start this spring season. But before we get into today's episode, we want to say thank you to our sponsors. Cycle CPA. If you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. And Knowledge Tree Consulting. George and Peter there are efficiency consultants in our industry, and I've had the privilege of having them both on one episode of the How to Hardscape podcast, and George multiple other times. And if you're looking for a software to dive into, check out the How to Hardscape headquarters software that will help you budget, estimate, job cost, time track, schedule. There's chat groups, there's courses. You can use it for onboarding, training purposes. You get access to our installation courses that you can assign to employees. You can manage your employees' time off requests and so on. Lots of different features in the software and many more coming. Check that out by clicking the link in the show notes or go to HTH, that's How to Hardscape, headquarters.com. Or you can also send me a message on Instagram. And without further ado, let's get into this episode with Marty Grunder. Today we are joined by Marty Grunder. He is the founder and president of Grunder Landscaping and the Grow Group, where he helps green industry professionals grow their businesses. Hello, Marty, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
Marty, let's just get a chance to kind of fill in our audience more about yourself and your background in this industry.
Well, I've been doing it a long time, which means a couple things. I guess I'm successful, but maybe more importantly, I'm old. I started Grunder Landscaping Company as a way to make money to go to college in 1986 with a used $25 used lawnmower we bought at a garage sale, and we've turned it into one of the Midwest's most successful landscaping companies. We're in Southwest Ohio. I'm based in Dayton, which is about an hour north of Cincinnati. We have approximately 50 people on our team, and we're about a $5.5 million a year company. And then I also, about 20 years ago, started speaking and teaching professionally across the country, and that evolved into our consultancy, which is the Grow Group. The Grow Group has 7 team members, and we predominantly work with the owners and leadership teams of landscaping and hardscaping companies all across the country.
Marty, I brought you on today to talk first about pre-qualifying leads. And in that sense that, when I first started my landscaping construction business, I was not pre-qualifying leads, and I was running around everywhere I could go. Whenever I got these leads, I wasted a lot of time. So, Marty, why should we be pre-qualifying leads?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that you should be doing it. I think number one, Michael, when we work with landscaping companies in our consultancy, there's 2 things right off the get-go that we focus on. The first one and foremost, critical to a strategy, and keep in mind that structure always follows strategy. So you don't go out and have pavers delivered and all sorts of other hardscape materials to a job site and then try to figure out design. What do? You put the design in place first, the structure, and then you go and execute a strategy to get the job done. Well, business success, there's a parallel there. And so one of the things that we absolutely, dial in with our clients are, who is your ideal client? And your ideal client is the intersection predominantly of those who you enjoy doing business with, make money off of, and are sustainable. Sustainable, in other words, they're clients that you can build a business off of. So we know that you have to find an ideal client to make your business work. Those contractors that try to play in the low cost, low bid, high quality, high service arena, that doesn't work. That's not sustainable. You got to pick a lane. It's got to be quality, service, price. Sometimes you can partake in 2 of them. It's very, very rare that you can succeed in all 3 in business. So finding your ideal client is critical. And then once we help them find their ideal client, finding their ideal team member to serve that ideal client, those are 2 foundational principles that we teach in the Grow Group and that we help contractors. So in terms of screening, if you know who your ideal client is, that is why the screening process becomes so important. Contractors need to be spending their time, money, and effort with the customers that are best aligned with their ideal client profile to greatly improve their chances for making money and having a viable business. There's a lot to unpack there, but that's the basics of it, and hopefully that makes sense to your listeners.
Absolutely, it does. Now, how about when we are pre-qualifying these customers? So like you said, you've kind of created a basis of what your ideal customer is. Do you have different methods that you recommend businesses pre-qualify their customers, different methods?
Yeah, so there's several ways to do that. The first thing I would say is that, Michael, what would you think if I told you that you should be closing 100% of the sales calls you'd go on? What would you think just initially if I told you that? Would you think that's a little bit outrageous?
I would think absolutely that's a bit outrageous.
Yeah. I heard a sales trainer tell me that about 10 years ago. And when he said that, I crossed my arms. I sat back in my chair and I said, this guy's an idiot. What is he talking about? You should close 100% of the calls you go on. He has no idea what this business is all about. After about 2 hours of listening to him, I saw what he was getting at, and I have to admit I agreed with him. His premise was the better you learn how to screen, you should be able to close a very, very high percentage, if not 100% of the sales calls that you go on. Now, we look for, with our clients we work with in our consultancy, we look to see them closing at a minimum of 45% closing ratio. So we're still way away from 100. But the goal to get to 100, the takeaway from that, Michael, is that you are becoming so good at where your business's sweet spot is. You know that you know what questions to ask of the prospect to see a company doing business. Years ago, when I got my business started, whoever called me, I was just very quick to go out and meet them. And I can't tell you how many of those leads were just completely dead. Wrong neighborhoods. Somebody had $200 to spend. I mean, we've all been there. So pre-qualifying and screening your calls becomes an important part of an effective selling strategy. There's several questions we ask, and let me touch on some of the things in the screening process that I think are critical. First of all, their name and address. When we are screening people, we're asking them for their name and address, and we're actually going to Google their home and see where it is. Is it in the area that we can effectively serve? Is it in a neighborhood that we have other clients in? Is it in a neighborhood that there's a good probability we could sell them a job? If the jobs that are our sweet spots are patios that are 400 square feet or higher, we like doing fireplaces, lifestyles, and this is a home in a low-income area and it's somebody kicking tires, you probably got to be aware there and ask more questions. But trying to screen them and finding them out. So where are they? And then one of the immediate questions is, tell us, Michael, where you heard about Grunder Landscaping Company. Now let me ask you a question. If they say, I found you on the web, how does that stand versus if they said, oh, we know a lot about you. You've done a lot of jobs in our neighborhood. Which lead, the one they found you on the web or the one that says they've seen you working in their neighborhood, which one would you think is a better prospect?
Definitely the one that has seen you around, or the word of mouth for sure.
Why? Why do you think that? What have you found in your own business?
In my own business, I find that if somebody refers me, or if they've seen me around and they've obviously seen the quality of my work, that they're more comfortable with going ahead with me, whereas the person that I get from the web, it may be more of a tire kicker.
Right, exactly. And I've sold millions of dollars worth of work to people that found us on the web. So I'm not here to tell you that that's bad, but it's a lot easier to sell someone that has some degree of familiarity with your company. When I started and I was 16, 17, 18 years old, no one knew who I was. I didn't get people calling up saying, we've seen your work, I saw your trucks, my wife works with your wife. I mean, all my stuff was scratch, claw, knock on doors, put up job site signs, things we still do today. But now a great degree of our work comes, where'd you hear about us? Oh my gosh, well, where didn't we hear about you? So it's a little different, but you got to start someplace. So for probably what is the lane that most of your listeners are listening into, That's why quality work becomes so important. Referrals are a backbone to any successful business. You take a restaurant, you take a clothing store, you take a car dealership. You look at with the proliferation of the internet and online reviews. I mean, someone can literally kill you with a review if you don't do a good job. So you're absolutely right on what you described there. Other questions that we like to ask, you talked about, is it over the web? Is it email? We screen all of our leads on the phone. We've got to talk to them on the phone. We want them to hear us. We want to hear them. We want to spend some time with them. What we have found through the years at Grunder Landscaping Company, and then in the literally hundreds and hundreds of landscaping companies that we teach sales to on an ongoing basis, get on the phone. Now, from a kind of a simplistic perspective, when they're talking to you, who can't they be talking to? Your competition. And understand, foundationally speaking, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And that's a process. And it's pretty hard to develop an online relationship with someone by doing emails back and forth. So we got to have a phone number. We got to talk to you, and we're going to ask you questions. And then some other questions we'll ask is, what prompted you to decide to go forward with this project? Have you ever worked with a professional landscaper in the past? If they say no, that can be good. It can be bad, but it certainly helps us prepare ourselves for the mindset of the prospect that we're about to embark on this call with. We'll ask them to tell us the process they're going to go through in selecting a contractor. That's important. If someone says, well, my husband teaches statistics at the local university, and I'm going to get 27 quotes, and we're going to put them through an algorithm to see which one is the best fit for us, that's probably not a good lead. When someone says to you, when you ask a question like that, what's the process you're going to go through in selecting a contractor? Well, we're not going to go with the cheapest price. We're going to go with the best contractor that has the best idea for our backyard. When you're talking with people like that, the more you talk to them, the more intimate that the conversation can become around details that can actually show you signals on how to sell that job. Now, I'm throwing a lot at you, but the main premise is find out where they heard about you and then ask them questions that really try to find out the motivation for this job. Let's say, for example, they say their daughter's getting married in 3 months. Well, your sense of urgency on trying to make a sale was just created. Boom. And why would you think that would be if they told you their daughter was getting married in 3 months?
Well, they want their project wrapped up before then.
Yeah. And if they're calling you in April, good luck finding a good hardscaping contractor that can do that job in 90 days. Mm-hmm. You may have just found the leverage point that you need to sell the job. So having a discussion with them on the phone, we do have web requests, we do get emails, but we always go to, can we please have a telephone number and let's get in the conversation with you. We have never been told no to that. Never. Now, we do have a lot of high net worth individuals that we work with. They text a lot. They email. We ask them up front, what's the best way to communicate with you? But I don't know about you, Michael. I don't want to give my cell phone number to a guy at the car dealership that I'm trying to figure out if I want to buy a new Yukon from him. I'd rather talk to him on the phone. I'd rather be a little bit incognito in that way, ask some more questions before we get into me giving you my cell phone number and everything else to have that kind of conversation. Not to say if they give you your number, you didn't get their cell phone, but we really want to talk to them on the phone and let them hear us, hear our passion, tell them to pull up our website while we're on the phone. And we're trying to get them to see that what we have to offer is most likely better than what they've come across so far. I think the last point I would make is that, when I started my business, the internet wasn't even around. I mean, there weren't iPads or anything like that. It doesn't matter if you're a startup or a $60 million a year landscape contractor. All of those kinds of companies can look the same on the web and handle the calls and everything else the same. So for your listeners that are small or getting started in the business, don't be intimidated by that. Your web presence and how you conduct yourself in this part can be every bit as good as a huge, enormously successful company.
Absolutely. And just some amazing information there and a lot of different questions that you can get into with your clients when you're pre-qualifying them. Now, Marty, with all those questions that we can ask them, is there anything that we should definitely not ask them? And the first thing that comes to mind quickly for me is budget. Should we be asking these clients about a budget, or is this kind of getting started with them, kind of feeling them out before you get into that money aspect of it?
Well, you got to be careful with budget. If you lead with that, your motive for what you're doing, you kind of come across as having what we call commission breath. You're just in it to get the sale. So you do have to be careful with that. But we also want to try to figure out if this is a fit. Now, this is going to scare some of your contractors listening, but we don't do free estimates. We don't go out and just do an estimate if you call in. There's a $100 consultation fee for one of our professionals to come see you. So there's a whole process we go through that. But so we have to know, what are you looking to spend? We also have a minimum job of $2,000. So if it's $1,000, we're not going to go out there. Now, that does prohibit us from having further discussions with people. But when I led off this podcast, Michael, I told you about the importance of knowing who your ideal client is. We know that our ideal client is not someone spending $800. The way our company is set up, we can't go out and do a project for less than $2,000 and have it make money. That's about one day's worth of work for one of our crews. So when you know that, you've got to get the budget. Now, the problem or the challenge becomes, how do you get the budget? And so here's how you do it. So you're talking about doing a new patio, Mrs. Jones. Yes, that's right. And how many people are normally going to be seated on the patio? Well, we have 4 people in our family, but we like to have family members over. At times there's 12. Okay, that makes sense. In terms of a patio, in terms of a size, you're going to want to be somewhere in the 400 to 700 square foot range for a patio to allow your family of 4 to enjoy it most of the time. But when you swell up to 12 people or so on that patio, maybe you're having a party, 700 would make that more comfortable. Generally speaking, our prices range per square foot on a patio anywhere from $15 to $30 a square foot. Now, that's a big range. The range depends upon how accessible is your backyard. Are there retaining walls that we need to do? What materials do you select? Is there any demolition that we have to do prior to this? So there's a huge range that goes there. But I can tell you a 400 square foot patio is the smallest patio you would want. And about $20 a square foot, generally speaking, will do a really, really nice job. So we are probably talking about somewhere in the $8,000 range to get into the backyard, do the patio, rehab the lawn, put it in there. That's just a ballpark figure, but $8,000 is a fair thing for us to start a conversation with. And then you ask them, how does that fit with what you were thinking about investing in your backyard? Well, if they say, oh my gosh, we were thinking like maybe $600, maybe $800, well, you just saved yourself a whole lot of grief and work that can be spent to someone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of just brought up something really quick, because you mentioned something really interesting about your business, if you don't mind getting into very quickly, is that you know that your business does not do a project under 2,000. For some of our listeners, how do you recognize what your business, what that number is for your business?
Well, look, when I was in my 20s and I was at the University of Dayton pursuing a degree in business and I was growing my business, I took some accounting classes and I started to understand how to make money. And so when I was a $400,000 a year company back in 1990, we didn't have a minimum job. I did everything. I didn't have the overhead and the structure that I have today, but I always knew my costs. And, that numbers is something that's intimidating to a lot of contractors, but you have to know your number. Amazon, where would Amazon be right now, Michael, if they didn't know their numbers?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You look at any successful business in any town of any contractor that's listening to this podcast right now, and I guarantee you much of their success is centered around their complete, intimate understanding of the numbers. How do I make money? Where do I make money? What are my expenses? What are the dangers associated with this project that it could go sideways and I could lose money? So, we know through an analysis that our minimum job is $2,000. Now, if one of our client calls and says, hey, I want you to add just a little 4x6 area off my patio for my grill. Now that I see what this is, I kind of wish we would have done something like that. What would that be? We don't tell them, well, we have a $2,000 minimum. That we might be able to do for $300 or $400 because they're already a client. So you got to be smart about this. But, when you look at all the money, Michael, that goes into mobilizing for a hardscape job, none of that's cheap. When we pull up for a hardscape job, between the truck, the trailer, the machines, the saws, the laser level, the supervisor's truck that comes out to guide them, all that. I mean, we might have $250,000 worth of material on a job. Even your new contractors, if they're renting a machine or any of that, it's pretty quickly you can pile up a lot of expenses. So you got to know your numbers.
Absolutely. And it's something that we're trying to help contractors out with on this podcast and through our website with different resources available to them. But I mean, there's amazing software out there like LMN that they can implement into their business. And we've had Mark Bradley from LMN on the podcast to talk more about that. Just some awesome things out there. And you can be the best craftsman in the world, but if you don't know your numbers, it's not going to be a long run in business.
Mark Bradley's got a wonderful product there. We have a lot of our clients using it, and we don't hear any bad things about that software. I think for small contractors, that product is a fantastic option that they should be looking at and considering, because it'll do just what we talked about, Michael. It'll teach you how to know your numbers. And when you know your numbers, you can be very empowered and make great decisions. There's something we teach our clients. I learned it in business school, and then I've been teaching it. Good managers make good decisions with good information.
Absolutely. And we got off on a little bit of a side tangent there, but now I'm thinking about Mark Bradley here. Marty, is there anything else that we should not be asking our clients in that first pre-qualifying stage?
I don't know about shouldn't. I think you have to, as best you can, put yourself in your client's shoes. For contractors listening, knowing what you know about the industry, consider someone was calling on your mother. What would you want them to say, not say? How would you see that experience going? And then judge that ultimate experience with how you're doing. I think you do have to be careful too early in the conversation bringing up budget. That's a conversation that you have once you learn a little bit more about what they're doing. Time frame is a very important part of what you're trying to figure out with this as well. If you talk to somebody and they want the patio done in a week, that's not going to work. So time frame is another very important thing, because like I mentioned there a couple minutes ago, if they say they've got a wedding coming up, well, there's your sense of urgency you can create to try to close the job. So I'd say time frame. The rest of it, I think we've touched on.
Absolutely. And kind of wrapping this up, is there anything else that we haven't discussed on this podcast that you feel would be valuable to our audience in terms of pre-qualifying these leads that are coming in?
The only thing I would say, Michael, is do great work. Do awesome work. That is the easiest thing any contractor can do to grow their business, is to do quality work. When you do quality work, people tell other people about it. It stands out when people have others over to their house or their place of business. I can't stress that enough. We don't do real well in the consulting arena when we go in to work with a client and they don't do good work. So we do some screening before. We check out what kind of contractor is this. If quality work is not something that they do, if they don't have good hardscaping skills, that's really hard for us to help them grow. You've got to be able to do the work the right way.
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank our sponsor, Cycle CPA. It's crucial to review your financial statements on a monthly basis so you can diagnose areas for improving your business's financial health early before they become significant issues. Too many contractors wait until the end of the year to review their financials as they file taxes, when it's often too late to take action to change the outcome. Cycle CPA not only handles bookkeeping and taxes, but they also ensure that you're armed with financial data on a monthly basis to make key business decisions. They offer benchmarking, cash flow forecasting, and assistance in developing targets for financial metrics. With their team of accountants specialized in the hardscape and landscape industry, they currently work with hundreds of companies in this field. Visit cyclecpa.com, and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode.
Now, we're getting into talking about the first consultation on this episode here. And I know we talked about it in the previous episode slightly that you do, in fact, charge a consultation fee. So we know where you sit, but why should we be charging first consultation fees when we go out there as contractors?
You know, when I got started in business, Michael, I did not charge a consultation fee. But through the years, we've developed quite a skill set. And it's not part of our mindset to go out and meet with someone, share with them all of our knowledge and everything else, all for a chance, a hope of maybe selling a project. We focus very intently on who our ideal client is, and we charge to go out and do a consultation because we want to be working with people that know a little bit about Grunder. If price is the main part of their analysis and they're just looking for the cheapest price, they're not our person. We don't want to work with them. So we have learned through the years that by charging a consultation fee, and we've done this for over 20 years, we weed out a lot of tire kickers. Now, I'm not here to tell you that all of your listeners should be charging consultation fees. I think you've got to be smart about it. You know, is your company profitable? Are you closing more than 55% of the jobs you go on? If your bottom line is 10% or higher and you're closing 55% or more of the calls you go on, I would not charge a consultation fee. I would say that you're probably doing a lot right there. So we charge a consultation fee as a way of filtering who we're working with and making sure that we're going out to talk to people that at least we have a really good shot at working with. If you talk to my salespeople and there's one person that's with us that was here with us before we did consultation fees and now after, if you ask him, should you do consultation fees, he'll say, oh, goodness, yes. It's another way of qualifying someone. It works for us. Not saying everybody should do it. You got to put a little thought into your business. Everyone here listening, Michael, knows their own business a lot better than hotshot Marty Grunder does. So be mindful of that. But we think it makes a lot of sense for consideration.
Absolutely. And I like that you talked about, tailoring it to your business and knowing your business and, deciding from there if you should be charging for that first consultation or not. Now, what should we be communicating with the customer when setting up the time and the meeting leading up to that first consultation?
Well, one of the things contractors do wrong, Michael, is they'll get through this whole screening process and they'll say something like, so when would you like to meet? You should be driving that call to maintain some sense of sanity in your schedule. So our salespeople never say, when would you like to meet? We look at our calendars when we're talking to them. We try to find a time that makes sense for us so that we can stay efficient with our work. And we may say something like, I could meet you Thursday afternoon between 2 and 6. I could meet you Friday between 1 and 3, or I could meet you Saturday morning between 9 and 11. Which one of those options works best? So you give them some options, but you point them to when it fits for you on your schedule. Look, we all have a lot of things we can do with our time, and it's not real efficient to just be going. I see so many contractors, we show them how to work more smartly by bossing their calendar, not letting their calendar boss them. One of the things people are amazed, I run 2 businesses. I'm a family man. I have 4 children. I'm involved in their lives. I try to find time to take care of myself. And they hear all that and they're like, well, how do you do all that? I mean, I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off all the time. How do you do that? Yeah, you run around with a chicken like your head cut off when you just let whatever distraction come into your life just take over that minute. I mean, if somebody calls and says, well, could you meet now? You don't run out and meet with them now. Now, maybe that works, but be a little more organized about that and be a little more thoughtful with your calendar. So that's how we set up those appointments, and that maybe gives a little more color there that would help your contractors in terms of time management.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, driving that phone call, you're the one in charge. You're the one that's telling them what to do, what they're doing.
Right.
What should we be prepared with when meeting that customer for the first time? What should we have with us, and what should be prepared for going into that?
That is such an awesome question, Michael. 30 years ago, I had a Ford Ranger pickup, and I bet, no lie, I had 10 photo albums that I carried with me, brick samples, all sorts of things to try to put on a good show. Now our sales professionals show up with an iPad because that iPad is loaded with everything. And again, like we talked in the prior episode, the playing field has been leveled for a lot of contractors through technology. You can have a terrific web presence. You can do a lot of little tricks with other things, with your calendar and other things that you're doing, an email ahead of time, confirming the appointment with some pictures of jobs. So, I think an iPad and a selling process, it's not something we can get into in the short time we have today, but, those are all terrific ways that you can stand out and see a sameness and show up prepared. So that iPad with all of your prior jobs, with specifications, with pictures of pavers. Now, granted, you may have to go get samples and so forth, but it's amazing what an iPad can carry with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then getting into that samples sort of thing a little bit, there's some contractors that will bring out samples to their customer, even if it is that extra trip, after that first consultation, deciding on the product, bringing out samples. And then there's some contractors that'll say, hey, this is the landscape supplier yard that I deal with. Go over there when you've got time and you go check it out and take a look at it, talk with them there. And that contractor won't even show up there and guide them through that process. They'll just hand it over to the landscape yard. And especially I've worked on the landscape yard end of things. I've dealt with many customers of contractors coming in and just talking to me, and that contractor's not there. Now, what do you have to say about that whole kind of process, deciding the product that they're going to use in samples?
I don't like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we want our salespeople to be with our clients. We want them to have an experience. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. And the more time you spend with these prospects, the more they get to know you. The more they get to know you, the more they like you. When they like you, you can get it over to trust. Trust is the foundational part to any successful relationship in business or life. And delegating that or casting that off and leaving that up to the supply yard, we would lose control on that, and we just don't do that. Our suppliers bring whatever samples we want to our office, and we'll meet them there. They'll bring whatever samples we want to our office, and we'll take them out to the client if the client can't meet at our place. But I don't like that at all. I don't think that bodes well for a long-term success. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. Mine as well. And just wanted to get your thoughts on that as it came into my head. Now, what questions should we be asking these customers in this first consultation?
That's the time for you to shine in terms of your expertise. You're walking out back, you see that the yard is flat and maybe it could accommodate a pool at some point. It's a young couple. They have 2 kids. You saw they drove a nice car. It's a nice home, but you can also tell they're getting started. Show your expertise. Do you think you'd ever want to do a pool in the back here? Yeah, we do. Okay, then my approach might be a little bit different then for this initial patio so that we could make sure that would connect well with the pool in the future. Your backyard is awful wet. To put a patio in here where it's dry, that's going to shove away from the yard. I see you have a dog. I think we might want to talk about some recontouring, maybe even some drainage back here to make this yard more user. Show your expertise. Show tricks that you can do. Ask to walk through the house and let them and let you see what colors and their style is. Let you look out the windows and see what they're looking at. A backyard patio, a front walk, any of that's extensions of the inside of the house. If the house has earth tones, browns and greens and oranges and yellows, I don't know that you want to put a contemporary charcoal black and gray patio out back that doesn't tie in with the motif that's on the inside. So show that you've been there before, show your expertise and try to get them excited about this. And what you're really trying to do is to be so thorough in this interview that if they have someone else come out to the house, they say, this guy, he didn't ask us any of this. Michael asked us all those things. Michael took an hour and a half. This guy kept looking at his phone. I know that the other company seems to have a good reputation, but I really like Michael. I like the ideas he brought. So, that's your time to shine. So put on a good show, show your wisdom and your expertise and your creativity, and distance yourself from the pack accordingly.
Now, if the customer is not asking questions, say, you want to be able to touch on some things to show your expertise, but that customer is just not asking the questions. They're not driving that conversation. Should you just be talking and bringing up the things as they go? For example, how you prepare a base, or, what details you put into your projects to ensure that it's going to last. If the customer's not asking questions like that, should we be driving that conversation for ourselves?
Well, I think you have to be careful there. So much of success in sales, whatever you're selling, is about understanding the person you're trying to sell to. If you call on me, for example, and you're trying to sell me a Ford truck, and you're going into the manufacturing process of how Ford makes the truck, and that your dad's one of the engineers and he does all the electrical wiring in the truck. And did you know that the electrical wiring in the truck, those harnesses are all made by hand and everything? I don't care anything about that. So you have to be reading buying signals. If they're not saying anything, it is possible that they're not interested in that. Keep talking, keep asking questions, and see which questions perk them up and what they're interested in. And in fact, we teach our salespeople that we have at Grunder and the ones we work with, say something to them like, listen, I want to be really respectful of your time. Are you someone that likes a lot of detail or not a lot of detail? And then pick up, like, am I going too fast? Do you need more information? How are we doing? I have all the time in the world for you today, Michael, but I want to make sure that I'm not boring you. I'm very passionate about my business, the whole part of it. And sometimes I have a tendency to go on too much about details that don't matter. And sometimes I might be skipping things that would matter to you. So why don't you tell me what you want and have conversations like that. Just talk about it. Nobody wants to go to the shoe store and hear about the Nike shoes from the salesperson that they're the ones that Usain Bolt won the Olympics and this year. And maybe they just came in to get a comfortable pair of shoes. Get them in the shoes and get them out the store. You can judge and tell what they're interested in by the amount of interaction they're giving back to you.
Absolutely great advice. And after this first consultation, we've got the information that we need from the customer and from the job site. Where do we take this from here, and how fast should we be doing this?
Well, we always say speed kills, and that's Midwestern slang for speed wins. The faster you can get back to someone, the better you improve your chances of making that sale. So if this is a real simple, straightforward patio, and it is possible for you to take that, maybe work on it at home at the kitchen table, get back to them the next day with everything, you're going to greatly improve your chances. It depends on how elaborate the job is. If there's engineering involved, there's designs, you got to get an architect involved, those things all take a little bit more time. But you never leave your initial consultation without an agreement on when the next action is. It's not, okay, I'll call you. No. All right, let me look at my calendar. I can have this ready for you in 7 days. Today's Saturday. What if I came back here next Saturday at 9:30 to make my full presentation of the entire project the way that we could do it? And it's just going to be drawings and quotes. I mean, this doesn't mean it's the way it has to be, but it's a good conversational start. Could we meet next Saturday at 9? People like that you don't want to leave that open-ended. You're saying I'll get back to you and all those other things, it just gives the prospect the opportunity to call someone else. You're trying to be as thorough and complete as you could possibly be on that appointment.
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank our sponsor, Knowledge Tree Consulting. They are efficiency consultants in the industry with 35 plus years of industry experience building Oriole landscaping in Toronto, which they are completely hands off at this point. George and Peter have been on the podcast before, and George, on multiple occasions now, I've personally leaned on him to help with the How to Hardscape headquarters software and how we can maximize the efficiency of user experience. And I know the guys at DTE Landscaping, Chuck and Jeffrey, who we've also had on the show multiple times, have hired them on in the past. Check out their consulting services, peer groups, and events that are coming up on their website, knowledgetreeconsulting.com, or check them out on Instagram at joinktc. Now back to our episode.
Now that first consultation is done, you've got everything prepared, estimates and designs. where do you take it from there? Do you set up a second consultation? Do you just communicate through email or over the phone to discuss what's going to happen next? Is it very specific to the situation? Where do you take it from there?
Well, there's a whole lot of things that go into the selling process that we teach at this point. But when you make your presentation, you should ask for the sale when you're there, but asking for it in a nice way. You've gone over the drawing. You've been with them an hour and a half. They really like it. I would say something like, Michael, I've really enjoyed being with you here today. We've gone through the whole design. I've gone over the proposal. Would this be something you'd like to move forward on today? If you are, all I need is a deposit and a signature, and I can get your job scheduled. Right now, if you let me know, we could be here in 3 weeks to start. I will also want to let you know you don't have to sign up today. There is no rush, but if you like what we're doing and you want to move this thing along, this is where we can go. What would you like to do? And then sit back, fold your hands, and go. Nobody wants to be sold. They want to buy. So, this stuff that sales professionals teach about always be closing and clicking the pen and telling them if they just sign here, that's not how I want to buy. And I don't think most consumers want to have stuff jammed down their throat. We always ask for the sale when we're there, but we are very kind about it. If they say, let's give us some time to think about it, I said, okay, would it be okay if I called you Wednesday? Would it be okay if we set up another appointment? What if I came back over and saw you Wednesday and we could talk through it? We're trying to get more FaceTime with them as possible. And then from that point, it's following up. And your job as a sales professional is to find a reason to follow up. It could be that you're going to be in the neighborhood. Would you mind if I stopped by? I know we met a couple weeks ago. I still haven't heard from you. What if I stopped by and we walked around again? Maybe you mail them a picture with a note thanking them for their time, and you tell them this is what your project would look like. It's similar. But we follow up. We definitely let these people know that we spent all this time with, that we really want to work with them. Now, the challenge becomes that the level of enthusiasm, if you get the sale from them, stays at where it is before the sale, that you're focused intently on delivering a quality job. Because like we've said in the prior podcast, I think I've already said about it in this one, Michael, a quality job is what sells the next one.
And just some excellent advice coming from you, Marty, these past 2 episodes, and really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us here. Now, is there anything else from the first consultation that we did not talk about that you'd want to talk about, or anything that we talked about that you'd want to highlight one more time?
This is a great selling tip. When you meet with someone, whether they give you the sale or not, sit down and pen them a note. Get some inexpensive postcards made up with pictures of your job, and your team is what makes your company better. Pictures of your folks, and write them a note. Michael, really enjoyed meeting with you Saturday. I look forward to working with you on your patio. I hope we get a chance to do that. Here's my cell phone. If you need anything, I'm here. I hope I can work with you in the future. Sincerely, Marty. Handwritten notes in today's Twitter, text, email, all that world, they stand out, and they have helped us sell millions of dollars of work at Grunder Landscaping Company. And this simple idea has been a very successful part of a selling strategy for the hundreds and hundreds of landscaping companies that we work with around the United States and Canada.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Once again, check out the How to Hardscape headquarters software by clicking the link in the show notes or going to Instagram and sending me a message if you want a demo of that. And also, if you have any topics, guest requests, send them there to @HowToHardscape on Instagram. And before we leave, we want to say thank you to our sponsors. Cycle CPA. If you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. And Knowledge Tree Consulting. George and Peter there are efficiency consultants in our industry, and I've had the privilege of having them both on one episode of the How to Hardscape podcast, and George multiple other times. Always great episodes, and I also got to sit down on a one-on-one with George and went through what they do for businesses, and I left that meeting with a lot of value, so I can't recommend them enough. If you want to learn more about what they do, go to knowledgetreeconsulting.com and get that conversation started with them today. And we look forward to meeting you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.